How's everything going today? My name is Nick, and today we are going to be doing a mock draft using Fantasy Pros. There's also Fantasy Football Calculator, which is also some mock draft that is available. It's mostly computer, however, every once in a while you do get live people, and one reason that I like playing Fantasy Football Calculator is that it gives me a little bit of a more realistic approach. But Fantasy Pros is really, really good because, like, for example, if you're doing it in your free time, you're picking against the computer, so it moves quick and you get to make your decisions. You don't have to wait like on other people taking up 45 seconds for their mock draft, and then it stretches out and it gets frustrating. So anyways, let's take a look at the draft strategy. So one of the first rules is to, excuse me, okay, that's better. One of the first rules is to take two bell cow running backs in the first, oh, whoops, geez. I'm on fire today. Okay. One of the rules is to take two bell cow running backs in the first 3 rounds. Now, I do this for 2 reasons. The first reason is that there's only about 14 to 16 number 1 running backs in the entire league, and if you play in a 12-team league, that is very little supply. If you're able to get your hands on 2 of them, then you have a ginormous advantage over other teams, and a lot of people don't realize it. So that's the first reason why we do this. The second reason why we do this is because it makes your season a lot funner. You take 2 number 1 running backs, boom, you set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about it for the rest of the season. I can't imagine telling you guys how many times I've had to scrap for running backs off of the waiver wire. One running back has one good week, and then everybody talks about it on the ESPN Fantasy Show, and then you pick him up, and then he has a bad week. Just take 2, boom, set it and forget it. It's over with. And to be honest, there's really not that big of a difference between a first-round wide receiver and a second-round wide receiver. I mean, there's a difference, but it's worth it. So that's the number 1 rule. So the second rule is to take a quarterback late. Obviously, there is a few exceptions in this situation. Like, for example, if it's really late and if you get a shot at Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson, if it's a bargain, then you snag that. But in general, the rule is to take a quarterback late, and the reason why is because I think usually on average last year, I think the number 1 quarterback only had about 35 to 45 more points than a mid-tier quarterback. And if you average out, 45 points, that's just a little under 3 points a game. It's more valuable to use a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round pick on one of your breadwinners, one of your running backs or your wide receivers, as opposed to taking a quarterback that might only get you 2 or 3 extra points a game. So that's very important, is to take a quarterback late unless you get a bargain on maybe Aaron Rodgers or Deshaun Watson. So the next rule is to look for players that are in their own tier. Maybe take a glance down at the rest of the players at a different position and say, okay, maybe next round a similar player to the one at the top will be around. However, if this is the last chance to get a crack at this type of skill level player, then I need to get him on my team. A draft can literally make or break your season, and it's amazing. I think a couple years ago, I had a bad draft and it destroyed it wasn't even fun because I had a bad draft. So okay, so the last rule is to fill in positions and then look to add depth with upside. So let me just be clear on something. I'm not telling you guys to fill in 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, your tight end, your defense, your kicker, and your quarterback in that order. What I'm telling you guys to do is to take 3 running backs, take 4 wide receivers, get a tight end, look at quarterback to see if there's any bargains, but if not, kind of just fill in those and then add upside. However, I do want to emphasize, or you know what, we'll get to that later because it's going to be good. Okay, so let's go into Fantasy Pros really quick. Now, the league that I'm going to do is I'm going to do a 12-team PPR league. We're going to do 3 wide receivers, and we're also going to do a flex that's a running back, a wide receiver, and a tight end. Okay. All right. So one thing that's cool about Fantasy Pros is when you click Start a Mock Draft, it randomizes your position, and I really like that. And I want to take a second and I want to talk about draft position and doing some research before you do your draft. So if I had to choose a draft position in a 12-team league, I would probably either choose 8, 9, or 10. And the reason why I'm doing this is for two reasons. The first reason is I think it's advantageous I think it's disadvantageous to get a very early pick. And the reason why is because, like, for example, let's just say you get Bell, you get Gurley, you get David Johnson or Antonio, but then you have to wait 16, 17, 18 picks, so you get a superstar, but then your next pick you get like a Tyreek Hill or a Doug Baldwin, like an upside like wide receiver 2 for your wide receiver 1, or your running back. In my opinion, it's a bigger advantage to maybe get like Kareem Hunt at 7, Alvin Kamara at 8, get one of those. And then, like, at the beginning of the second round, maybe Mike Evans, Julio, A.J. Green, Devontae Adams is still around. There's really less of a tier. And to be honest, I would rather have, like, Kareem Hunt and, like, Mike Evans than Bell and, like, Tyreek Hill or Doug Baldwin. So I'm really happy that I got the 9th draft position. I think that I'm going to have a really good draft. That's a big advantage. Another note that I want to do, I also want to mention two things. The first thing that I want to mention is to do your research before your draft. Usually you know your draft position ahead of the draft, so you can practice like set up like a first round, like in terms of projecting your pick. And I also want to mention that there's a couple websites where, like, if you give them like $20, they'll give you access to their like draft rankings. I did one of those last year, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made because I actually won a 12-team league last year. And also ESPN's rankings are also really legit, and those are free. One way to practice before drafts is to use Fantasy Pros and Fantasy Football Calculator, the 2 mock drafts that I mentioned today. However, once it gets closer to the football season, ESPN and Yahoo both do mock drafts, and if you just put in time and just hammer those, it's really worth your time just to get a solid draft, and then you have a fun season. So why don't we kick this thing off? I have a good draft position. I'm feeling confident. I feel good. I think that this is going to be a good draft. This is one of the good things that I'm really, really good at in life, fantasy football. Okay. So I currently am at pick number 9, and here are some people that are available. These are really some picks. Okay, so Odell Beckham Jr. is on an island here. He's in a top 3. I'd say that it probably goes. The tier 1 wide receivers are Antonio Brown, Hopkins, and Odell. That's like they're on their own tier. However, Odell, I think, is risky. He's been having some off the field troubles lately. Sometimes I feel like they don't use him. Not that he's overrated, because he's not, but they don't use him. And they don't pretend like, dude, we have Odell Beckham Jr. They don't use him. So right here, I'm going to go with Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt helped me win my 12 team last season. He's a superstar. He's a workhorse, and he'll be a stud running back. So I'm going to take Kareem Hunt right now. Okay. All right. So this was cool because there's really minimal difference between Keenan Allen and Odell Beckham Jr. There's like a little, but not to the point where I was able to get Kareem Hunt. So there I chose Kareem Hunt, and I still have the opportunity to get a very, very, very good wide receiver. Keep in mind that Keenan Allen is in PPR. So why don't we take a look? Right now I'm thinking I'm going to look at some tiers amongst some running backs. I'm also going to look at some tiers amongst some wide receivers. So Melvin Gordon and LaShawn McCoy are on their own island a little bit. Right here is where it kind of drops down into the running back 2 range. Mark Ingram is very good. I have a hunch that Kenyon Drink or Jerick McKinnon will still be around. However, Keenan Allen, you know what? This is all kind of just a huge. I'm going to take Melvin Gordon because Melvin Gordon was very good to me last year. He would get me like 20 points a game. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, and this is exactly why I think this is a really smart decision, and I really recommend that you guys do. I'm not saying that you have to take two running backs in the first two rounds, but really, like, for example, like maybe if Antonio Brown or Hopkins or Odell was around right about now, I would take this. But Keenan Allen he's just about the value at where he's at. He's really nothing special at this point in the draft. So I'm going to take Melvin Gordon. And now I have two bell cow running backs. I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the season. I set two. I fill in my wide receivers. I get a strong backup running back. And then, boom, I have a solid team with a solid frame like a house. So I'm going to snag Melvin. Okay. Saquon Barkley went pretty early. But we don't really know what team he's on yet. Okay, so let's take a peek at what we have. Okay, so at this point, I don't have a backup running back. I want to take a moment. I want to talk about some third running backs that you can do. What I usually try to do is I usually try to get a third running back on my team that is a number one running back. And if you're smart and strategic, you usually can. Like, for example, LeGarrette Blount left behind 180 carries when he left Philadelphia to go to the Lions. So Jay Ajayi is somebody that would probably still be around next round or in 2 rounds. I'm not sure about Carlos Hyde. Okay, I want to take a second and talk about Alex Collins. Alex Collins is going very, very late. However, at the end of the year last year, he popped off, and he really is a number one running back. So it could be a pretty good strategy to take two bell cows, then grab like Alex Collins or Jay Ajayi as a backup running back, and then boom, you have 3 number one running backs in a backfield on your team. You have really good depth. However, let me take a look at wide receiver. Adam Thielen. Okay. So Adam Thielen is on an island right now. He's in his own tier. And to be honest, an argument can be made that he's a low-end wide receiver 1. He's definitely a high-end wide receiver 2. And with how I got Kareem Hunt and Melvin Gordon, I have Melvin Gordon as my running back 2. That's a fantastic start. I'm going to take Adam Thielen right now. See who else is there. I hope Fitzgerald. Oh, nice. Okay, Fitzgerald's still around. Okay, so a lot of these backup running backs are still available down here. So I'm just going to wait and see and watch them fall, and I'm going to look at my wide receivers. Okay, I don't even need to look at this. Larry Fitzgerald's on an island. Okay. Alrighty. Ooh. Demarius Thomas. Oh, okay. Okay, so I'm very happy that this situation came up so I can talk about this. Maybe it's just me or maybe it's everybody. I want to talk about these 2 guys because with my draft strategy, these are 2 guys that I'm consistently getting a lot, either as my wide receiver 3, worst case scenario, best case scenario in my flex, which if I were to get Pierre Garçon or Devin Funchess in my flex, I would feel very, very good about that. So Devin Funchess and Pierre Garçon are clearly number 1 wide receivers. There's really not much competition. I want to take a second and I want to mention how Garoppolo had a really good last 4 games. Pierre Garçon, however, was injured towards the end of the season. It was Marquise Goodwin on the San Francisco 49ers that popped off. He kind of has a similar speed, similar body type and athleticism to Pierre Garçon. However, I do think that Marquise Goodwin is going to go back to number 2. And Devin Funchess also had a very strong second half of the season because Kelvin Benjamin was there. And then they traded Kelvin Benjamin, and it pretty much showed that they were saying that Devin Funchess is our future and we're going to invest in him. So, to be honest, I don't think you can go wrong with either of these 2, but I'm going to take Devin Funchess, just relying on my gut instinct, and I also feel that an argument can be made that Marquise Goodwin could be making Pierre Garçon look over his shoulder a little bit in terms of targets and touches. So I'm going to snag Devin Funchess as my wide receiver 3 and feel really good about it. Okay. Oh, great. Good. So Pierre Garçon is still available. But also so is Carson Wentz. I don't like taking a quarterback. So right here, experts are telling me to take Wentz. But for example, I don't have a third running back. I don't have a flex. I really don't think that there's that big of a difference between, for example, maybe Phillip Rivers or Alex Smith, who I can get at the very end with Carson Wentz, compared to how valuable my picks are now. So I'm going to take a look at what running backs are around, whether, okay. Okay, so right now I'm at a tough position in the draft because this is a very big drop off right here, after Pierre Garçon, because Corey Davis is a number one wide receiver, but Tennessee does have a lot of options. They have Delaney Walker, and Jamison Crowder was really inconsistent last year. All of these are wide receiver fours at this point after Pierre Garçon. However, in terms of running back, there's Alex Collins, who is still a number one running back, and there's Jay Ajayi. Lamar Miller is also a number one running back. Tevin Coleman's a number two running back. Chris Carson is a number one running back, but ever since Beast Mode left, the Seattle backfield has been kind of a little bit of a cluster, and it's not somebody that I want. So what I'm going to do is Pierre Garçon, or like Sterling Shepard, Nelson Aguilar, Pierre Garçon, or Nelson Aguilar. Maybe I could see if Nelson Aguilar drops. So right now my gut is telling me to take Jay Ajayi. He has a lot of athleticism. Oh no, you know what? However, I forgot about Wendell Smallwood. Wendell Smallwood has been kind of stealing Jay Ajayi's touches a little bit. Okay. I'm going to take Pierre Garçon, and I'm going to hope that Lamar Miller, Jay Ajayi, Tevin Coleman fall to the next round. However, I don't think that they're going to, but I do need a flex. The reason why I'm going to choose Pierre Garçon is because my flex is still open. I have two running backs filled. The flex is the breadwinner. The backup running back is a backup. It doesn't bring me points. Okay, so there goes Alex Collins. Yep, there goes Ajayi. That's too bad. Okay. So why don't we take a look at who's left over for running backs? Okay, so I did miss out on a little bit of a tier of a running back by choosing Pierre Garçon. However, I think that I made the right decision just because of how huge of a drop-off it is. Okay, I'm going to take Lamar Miller. He gets a lot of their carries, and he's almost their number one running back, and I don't think that I can complain about having a third backup running back that's a number one running back. So I'm going to take Lamar Miller here. And now I won't have to worry about running back for a few rounds. Okay. So at this point, let's take a look at my team. So at this point, I have 4 wide receivers and I have 3 running backs. Now, this is the point where, with my draft strategy, I look to fill in other positions. So the first thing I usually do is go to tight end. Jack Doyle is pretty solid. Trey Burton. Jordan Reed is upside. Kirk Cousins is on an island right now. And then I could get... Okay. I'm going to take Kirk Cousins because he's on an island right now. He went to the Vikings and he has Thielen and Diggs. Oh, you know what? I also have Adam Thielen. So that could be a nice little combo to have Kirk Cousins and his number one wide receiver. Okay. Oh, perfect. Now Jack Doyle's still around. Okay. So I'm going to take Jack Doyle over Jordan Reed just because Jordan Reed is always hurt, and I want a number one tight end that I can just set and forget. And I want to take a second and I want to talk about Tyler Eifert and Jordan Reed. So just to be clear, I'm not telling you guys to take Tyler Eifert or Jordan Reed as your primary tight end. That's a very bad idea. However, Tyler Eifert has superstar potential. In the past, he's popped off and he's been a big 3 tight end. He's always hurt. However, it's a good idea to take a solid tight end and then take Tyler Eifert later in the draft just by sheer upside. And the reason why is because if you take a good tight end and then you take Tyler Eifert later in the draft, then you have the upside where, let's just say, if he gets healthy and if he pops off, then you get a top 3 or a top 4 tight end just for being smart later in the draft. So right here, Jack Doyle's on an island. He's in his own tier. I need a tight end, so I'm going to snag him. Okay. Now, I would like to take a second and talk about something. So I want to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. So as I mentioned earlier, I won a 12-team league last year, and I did it. One thing that really helped me was the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. They got to a point where I think like 4 or 5 weeks in a row, they got me like 20, 25 points. Like it was basically like picture having a second quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to be that way this year. However, they were so good to me that I want to make sure that I get them. So I'm going to take a second. I'm going to look at where they are in the overall. Yeah, it looks like they're not really, okay. Yeah, they're not going anytime soon. They'll still be around. Okay, so disregard everything that I just said. Sanu's still around. He's good. Okay. All right, I'm going to take Jordan Reed here, just for the exact same reason that I said. He's still around. It's a good bargain. I have 2 tight ends. If he pops off, boom. Okay. Ooh, Jared Goff's still around. He's a good bargain. Where's the Jacksonville Jaguars? Okay, they'll still be around. All right, I'm going to take Jared Goff. I need a number 1 quarterback. Or actually, you know what? No, I'm not. I'm going to take there's really not much of a difference between Jared Goff and like Alex Smith or Phillip Rivers, who I can get in a few rounds. And Ty Montgomery, the Packers backfield situation is kind of up in the air right now, and whoever emerges can be a beast. So I'm going to take Ty Montgomery. I think he's a good deal. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to get the Jacksonville Jaguars defense just because of how good they are. Boom, I took a defense a little early. I have one of the best defenses in the league. So, however, just to be clear, any other defense other than the Jaguars, I would not take this early. The only reason why is because they're superstar. They're like the Le'Veon Bell of defenses. Okay. All right. Phillip Rivers is still around. He's on an island. He's a solid quarterback. He's throwing to Keenan Allen. I'm going to get Rivers. Oh, Eifert's gone. Okay. Okay. So at this point, I still don't have a kicker. I have 2 bench spots opening. I want to take a second. I want to talk about Greg ZUERlEIN. Greg ZUERlEIN was so good last year that they gave him the nickname Legatron, and he was literally bringing in so many points. The Rams have an amazing offense. They got Brandon Cooks. I'm going to take Greg ZUERlEIN. I think it's okay to take a big kicker at this point in the draft. To break down the kicker tiers, Greg ZUERlEIN is in his own tier, and then the next tier is Steven Gostkowski, Justin Tucker on the Ravens, and Matt Bryant on the Atlanta Falcons. So I think it's really important just to get a good kicker because they start every single week. They bring you points every single week, so it's good to get a solid kicker at this point. Okay, so I filled in a kicker. Okay, all right, so at this point, I have 4 wide receivers, I have 4 running backs, I have 2 tight ends, I have 1 quarterback, I have a defense, and I have a kicker. So I do have 2 spots left. Oh no, it's too bad Alex Smith isn't around. Alex Smith is my lucky charm. LeGarrette Blount. Kenny Golladay. I'm going to take Kenny Golladay here because I'm at the point in the draft where I'm looking for sheer upside. Really, phone alarm? I'm at a point in the draft where I'm looking for sheer upside, and there was a point last season where Kenny Golladay, I think he had like 2 or 3 multiple touchdown games in a row, and people were starting to talk about him as like a top 30 fantasy wide receiver. So I'm going to take him. Maybe he pops off, and maybe I slide him in my wide receiver 3 or my flex later in the season. Okay, so here is my very last pick. I want to take a second and talk about LeGarrette Blount. So, as a Lions fan, I live near Detroit, and as a Lions fan, I don't have very much faith in Detroit Lions players other than Matt Prater. Matt Prater is a very good kicker because the Lions, what happens is they get on a drive and then they kick a field goal, and he gets a lot of points. So Matt Prater is a very solid fantasy kicker to have. However, I have 1 spot left. LeGarrette Blount, he has a lot of potential just to fall into the end zone like he used to do on the Patriots. And the Theo Riddick, Amir Abdullah situation is up in the air. The Detroit backfield is kind of up for grabs right now. So I'm just going to take LeGarrette Blount just out of sheer upside. Okay. I'm not updating. No, I'm not updating. Who are you? Who are you to dominate me? Okay. So Fantasy Pros gave me an A- in terms of my draft. However, I want to mention that this is the same Fantasy Pros that's telling me to like take Carson Wentz in like the 4th or the 5th round as opposed to like my 3rd wide receiver, you know. So you kind of have to take everything with a grain of salt. However, if I was in a 12-team league, I would be very, very happy with my team. I have at quarterback. I have Kirk Cousins. He's going to be on the Vikings, and he's going to be throwing to Thielen and Diggs. I have Rivers, who's a solid second quarterback. I have Hunt and Gordon. Gordon is a running back 1 in my running back 2 spot. I stack Thielen and Cousins. Larry Fitzgerald is as solid wide receiver 2 as they come. Devin Funchess is more of a flex, and I have him in my wide receiver 3. That's a little weakness, but I'm being a little bit of a perfectionist right now. Jack Doyle's solid, and I have Jordan Reed as a backup for upside in case he pops off. Pierre Garçon is a good flex because anytime you have a number 1 wide receiver that's going to get 100 to 140 targets a season as your flex, you really can't complain. I have the best defense in the league that has Le'Veon Bell superstar potential. I have Legatron, and on my bench I have Lamar Miller, who's my 3rd running back, who is basically the Houston workhorse, so I can never complain about having a number 1 running back as my 3rd running back. Basically, the rest of my bench is all upside players, which is what you should do. So that's basically the end of my draft video. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment, send me a message. I do have quite a bit of passion for fantasy. I could talk about fantasy in my sleep. I could dream about fantasy. If I spent the night in jail for some reason, I would just think about fantasy. That's just how much I love it. However, I do not intend to go to jail anytime soon because I have my life together. So leave a comment. Just a heads up, I am going to be coming out with a video soon about free agency and how it might affect wide receiver committees and running back committees who might lose touches, what wide receivers might be target hogs with trades. And I also am going to be coming out with a video after the draft so we can talk about maybe like where Saquon Barkley goes and whether he's going to move up in the draft, you know, other wide receivers value that decrease if they draft a really good wide receiver, etc. So I want to thank you for watching the video. I hope you guys have a nice night, and I hope that you guys have a nice rest of the weekend and love life. Thank you very much.